This is Selena Yvette, host of Stories from Planet Earth. Thanks for listening to the following show on Public House Media.
Hey, you're listening to Let's Hustle with Lee and Chelsea. We are two girls making our way in sales and entrepreneurship.
We set out to make this podcast after entering our late 20s and realizing we were hitting a wall and felt like our lives and careers were stagnant. After expressing this feeling to countless other women, we realized we weren't alone.
So each week we're bringing you real conversations with real people that are authentic, realistic, and relatable in hopes that you can grow into the best version of yourself. So strap in and let's hustle. Hey everybody, it is Lee and Chelsea over here on Let's Hustle podcast. This week we have a really awesome guest, and it's an interesting story of how my relationship and our guest started. So on Instagram she had reached out to me, and this sweet woman just wanted to help. And so she's talking to me, and I've never told you this, but when we were talking, I was like, okay, let me know how much it's going to cost. And she's like, I just want to do it for free for you to help you out. And I was like, who is this woman? She is an integrity coach. She's changed her entire life. She's helped countless other women, including myself, just by showing kindness. She's extremely talented when it comes to branding and building brands. And so we want to welcome our guest today, Milan.
Hello.
Hey, girl.
Everyone.
Hi, welcome. So I guess we'll just kind of start off also with intuition coach, right?
Yep, an intuition coach.
You said integrity. So
Did I say integrity?
I just wanted to correct that real quick.
Sorry.
I was like, an integrity coach.
No, I meant
I was confused.
Okay, can I just tell you, in my head, I said intuitive coach. And I thought that's what I said.
All right. Well,
Chelsea.
We'll move on to the first question with the intuition coach. Milan, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got your start, and what inspired you to choose this as a career path.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up with an Eastern European family, and we're always kind of different than the rest of society. We grew up with having nothing. And, I was somebody who was always gifted. I had this big secret for several years. And I thought I would never have to share it with the world until the moment that, people started asking, what is your story? And to be honest, I really became an intuition coach. It starts at the age of 3 or 5 years old, when I knew odd enough that I was going to become gravely ill with I call it the nightmare disease. And what 3 or 5 year old knows about this stuff, And for me, when I was going through it, I just kind of, like most people with their intuition, I was kind of like, oh, maybe it's no big deal. It's just, maybe anxiety, maybe something like that. Maybe just a kid being a kid, right? Thinking all these crazy things. Fast forward in my life, 5 to 6 years in, I became very, very sick. I remember just getting up from my chair. I was working for a large corporate company, and the simple function, of getting up from your chair is pretty easy, right? But in this case, my body decided not to work in that moment and decided to have this drop foot effect where my left leg was no longer working and mobile. So I didn't panic. I remember just kind of okay, maybe, trying to rationalize it, trying to understand what was going on. And for me, I thought, okay, I have to get to some kind of stable area. I'm going to fall if I continue to try to walk. So I got to the step finally, and I remember the episode lasting 30 minutes because I could remember the marker on my on the timer for my lunch, to be halfway done and stuff like that. And so I was like, okay, this is something I have to take care of right now. And I went upstairs, and I remember just thinking, okay, I have to be calm. So I went to the urgent care, and I just remember the doctor's face turning white, pure white, like a ghost. And basically they were saying Milan, we want to let you know we're really worried about you. And I was like, what's going on? And they said, well, you failed your neurologic exam. Your reflexes are not responding. And I remember like feeling this horrific feeling of panic within me. And I was like, oh my God. And I started bursting into laughter, which is normal for me because when I'm very scared, I like start laughing or get really uncomfortable and start being sarcastic. And I just remember feeling like, could this be it? Could this be the day that my intuition was telling me all about? It started off as a joke, a little 3 or 5-year-old, and then all of a sudden this horrible nightmare disease entered my body. And I remember just thinking, like, I have sheer motivation with my intuition telling me, keep going, like, you have to do this. This is going to be the fight of your life. And it was complete hell, to be very honest. When I went and they were like, you need to go to the ER, I was like, being Eastern European, you don't really want to go to the ER. So I tried to figure out what I could do for myself. And finally I figured out maybe I'll go to like a specialist. I went to neurologists. They ran hundreds of tests. And I just remember sinking in my chair when he delivered the results, and he was like, we don't know. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? Like, so my body is failing, that it's not working right. And what do you mean you don't know? And so I was enraged, I like tried to hold it back as much as I could, but he was telling me you can't drive, you can't work, you can't everything. I went from being this strong individual who, bought a house at 19 and, published her own book at 12, and like this person who could just do anything she put her mind to being this person who started to struggle with daily tasks. And I just remember like thinking, I have to figure this out. I'm going to stop at nothing until I get there, until I get the answers that I need. And so my intuition kept like pushing me and saying, hey, pay attention to what's going on, and really, try to push yourself, try to motivate yourself no matter what anyone says. And I had no idea what I was in store for. Each day would lead with new puzzling symptoms, horrific, scary ones, where I'd wake up and half my body would be paralyzed, or I'd wake up and I'd be covered in bruises without any movement, or, I'd wake up and I wouldn't remember something, or, somebody would say, oh, you look like you're almost like you have Alzheimer's or something. Here I was like this young individual who, young people, they're not supposed to get sick. At least that's what we're told, and anyone in their early teens, late teens to late 20s and 30s, it's definitely eye-opening. And so for me, I just kept pushing on, and a lot of people probably would have said, like, I'm not going to trust my intuition, it's crazy, like maybe everybody's right. I ended up going to like 100 different facilities all around the United States, and even consulted some countries, and nobody had the answers. In fact, their resort was to be mean, to be very devaluing in conversation. They would say, probably you're making it up, or oh, maybe you have to go to the psychologist. I would go to the psychologist, and they would be like, oh, like, so talk to me a little bit. And we talk, and they're like, I'm sorry, Milan, you don't belong here. And my intuition was just saying, keep fighting. And I hear this, like, it's not a voice, but I could feel this feeling in my chest just keep pulling me forward to fight even more and more, even though I was extremely exhausted, and just going through all these different things where I watched my body, each organ just dysfunction in ways you just couldn't imagine. And then for me, I was finally like, I have to give up. I can't go anymore. Like, I can't do this anymore. And then my intuition's just like so loud in my head saying, keep going. Like, you're almost there, like almost like this coach, And I never thought in my wildest dreams, I never thought that this would be something that would happen to me. And I just remember like this disease would mimic other diseases. It would act as if it was like one of those rare conditions like porphyria or like FARS, or like these conditions that only hit 1 out of 30,000 people in the world kind of thing. And nobody understood why. And their only resort was to say she's making it up, or she's wrong, or, psychological, or like whatever. And that takes a toll on you, and that breaks your spirit down. And I just remember crying when the doctor was like, oh, just can you draw like a little square? And the little square it didn't happen because my brain just didn't want to process the information, and it just forgot the steps already. And for me, that was very humbling because I'm somebody who's very gifted in art naturally at a young age. I could draw at a collegiate level. And I was like, this is really not good. I don't know what to do now. If people can't help me, my family can't help me, my friends or my coworkers or doctors can't help me, who will help me? And I just remember falling to my knees in that moment and thinking, like, is this it? And I kept pushing myself just a little bit more. And then my intuition just spoke a lot louder and said, there's something wrong with your brain physically. And I thought, okay, well, I've seen nearly 100 doctors. I've gone to even like the NIH and Mayo, the big institutes that are supposed to have all the answers and be this elite research facility. And I thought to myself, what is my intuition talking about? I felt crazy. And I just remember going through all of it. I remember everything was just like a nightmare. There were days I couldn't sleep. There were days that for 12 days I had not slept, but only 2 hours. And I was exhausted.
Yeah.
But I couldn't sleep. And I just remember in that moment, my intuition said, it kept telling me more about my brain. And it said, like, there's something wrong maybe on the right side. And in school I was studying in university to be like a doctor, but I didn't finish, and so I didn't have that kind of background knowledge where I could, figure out where something was in my brain. My intuition was totally blindly guiding me. And I just remember opening up the image online and looking, and I'm like, in my intuition saying, there it is right there. So then I start to instruct the doctors, showing them, hey, here it is. Here's where the problem is. And they just turned their head and they were like, there's nothing there. And I remember seeing like a man's face, like in almost like in you can call it like a dream vision, in your mind. And I saw the man who was going to change my life. And when I mean change my life, he was going to prove that these hundreds of doctors that I'd seen all over the US were wrong. That they did not help me because they didn't have the answer. They didn't push hard enough. And in the end, there was a lesion in my brain. There was something responsible for the inflammation going on throughout my entire system. And finally, he's like, I've never seen something like this, but he's like, it's there. And we have to change the records immediately and notify all the hospitals. So all of a sudden you have all these hospitals becoming very argumentative and very mean and saying, oh my God, like, she's making it up or what, anything to rationalize and cover their mistakes. And then I remember sensing and feeling like it's inflammation, and then thinking of like immunotherapy, and then thinking of steroids, and then thinking of methylprednisone, which is actually what I take to solve these problems. And nobody could understand still to this day. They're like, biologically, it doesn't make sense. We don't understand how you could know. It's impossible. And I just thought to myself, my intuition just saved my life. And so I thought to myself, after that, after I recouped and, started to heal emotionally from everything, because you can only imagine the trauma that was endured through every visit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought, okay, people have to know that they have this powerful source within them that they can just turn on like a light switch. And they'll never have to go through a moment of abuse or pain or suffering or anything. And they'll be able to go on the path that they're meant to do, to do whatever their purpose is. And that's initially what really got me started with this intuition coaching. I thought to myself, there's nothing like this out here. There's life coaches for everyone, right? There's financial ones, business ones, spiritual ones, but there's nobody that actually shows you how you can tap into yourself and learn more about your intuition, cultivate this unbreakable bond so that you have this best friend for life that will always tell you the good and the bad of what's going to happen to you and what's going on. And that's when I started my practice. And that's when I started to think, I'm going to teach people, and this is how I'm going to impact the world.
That's amazing. That's awesome. So how long have you had your practice? And do you have any
certain like success stories or any, you know, crazy experiences that you've had with anyone that you've helped coach?
You know, for me, it took a long time to get to a point where I turned it into like a business, and because I felt like it was a very sacred thing, and I still do to this day, but I had many people push me and say, like, you have to start, you know, creating like a formal business out of this. You know, you can't just do it for free for people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started the official company opening date was like 3 months ago. And I've helped 185 people in that time.
Holy cow, girl. That's amazing.
I know. I was like, okay, girl.
Yeah, I was definitely in denial for a bit. I thought I would belong in the corporate world and that this wasn't something I was supposed to do. And I had 300 people the next day tell me that this is something I'm supposed to do. So I was like, okay, that's a little bit of more direction. So, you know, from God, the universe, whatever you believe in. So it was very interesting. It was very empowering to get to this. And I had, you know, I can't go into too much detail because it is confidential, but with my clients, you know, I'm close with all of them. I'm close with their mutual friends. I'm close with their husband, and you know, everybody. Basically, it's like a big family, so to speak. And you know, my clients were always talking on the phone, and their friends too. And one of their friends called me and said, you know, you started your like 3-month program basically, and you didn't even finish. Like, you're not even done at 3 months. You know, you just started with her, and it's maybe been a little bit less than a month. You know. And I was just thinking, her friends are telling me, we don't recognize her, like, in a good way. Mm-hmm. All the pain, all the trauma that she's endured, it's literally like she's a new person. What did you do to her?
So what do you start with? Like, if you have somebody, are you like starting from like past trauma and working through that? Are you teaching them how to like listen to their intuition? Like, what are some of the things that you're doing?
Yeah. So what I do is very, very specific method and stuff like that. And so it's a little bit of both. You know, you take your intuition and you can have an unbreakable bond with it, but you have to heal first. Like, that's a requirement. And so for me, I, you know, take a little bit of EFT and biofeedback and some psychological training and like different things that are applied, you know, to have a balance of spirituality and scientific approach. And I work with the client one-on-one, and I do something called an intuitive sensing for about like 3 to 5 hours, where they're not with me, they're not talking to me. And I know it's a little bit harder to believe, but I've been gifted since I was 3 or 5 years old in a very intuitive way. And I figured out a way where I can kind of see the brain and see what's going on and see what needs to be lit up back up again. And then I get this intuitive sensing, this feeling of this whole narrative going on. And I articulate this report targeting their subconscious, because a lot of people don't know. We think when we heal, we go to the psychologist or something like that, or we go to a coach, and they say, well, tell me what you think you need to work on. But that's the biggest misconception. That's the biggest challenge, is because it's what they think they need to work on. We don't have access to our subconscious as people naturally. Intuitive people, we do, because that's where we get the information. It comes from the subconscious. And so I do like a remote targeted session, almost in a meditative process remotely, where I'm able to pick out everything that they need to work on. And a lot of this stuff is shocking. A lot of these people are like, oh, really? Like, I didn't even know that this was something. I don't say I can remember this. And I'm like, yeah, it's just trust me, you know, keep going forward. And by the first month, they're turning around. They're like, oh my God, like, if you would have told me initially when you did that this stuff was blocking me, I would have never believed you, because it just, to them, like, they're so desensitized from this stuff that they don't realize what's impacting them anymore. And because we've been taught for so long that we have to self-accept all our pain, all our trauma, blockages, you know, what have you, it doesn't even have to be trauma. You know, it's just about a different way of thinking when it comes to the healing model. So I work with them, I create an articulate report, and then I give it to them like, hey, does everything make sense to you as far as like accurate information? And they don't give me anything, no background information, no name, nothing. And then we go over that a little bit, and then we schedule like a 2 or 3 hour coaching call where we're actually talking about everything that they feel and absorb. Sometimes they started the method already, and then they're telling me feedback and stuff like that, and then we're implementing a coaching plan that's very customized to what they need to work on. So if it could be abandonment issues, we'd have them do a certain thing. And none of it is time intensive. We're talking no more than 15 minutes, maybe like 5 times per week. So it's nothing too crazy, doesn't cost a lot of money. A lot of these things are a lot of fun exercises, but they're very psychologically impacting. So that's what I do. So
Wow. Because I know that a lot of people describe intuition as like that little voice in your head. What would you tell somebody who is just starting to try to listen to that voice, and what do you think are like the signs between like something being like your intuition or signs that like you're just toxically telling yourself certain things?
Right. So the correct term, so it's the inner voice is the toxic voice that we call that kind of mask as intuition. And a lot of people think that intuition is like a gut feeling, even though we may have like, you know, changes in our body, like sensations. It's not a gut feeling because that's more a biological process. So it's really like to understand how to strengthen your intuition, you have to understand how to discern from it. You know, what is intuition? So you're absolutely correct with where you're going with this. So basically what you want to do is a couple things. You want to ask yourself, kind of, you know, consciously say, okay, everything that happened today, what belongs in the intuition column and what belongs in the inner voice column. And an intuition is going to be very irrational, spontaneous. It's never going to have the word because in it. So, for example, you could be working and all of a sudden you're like, I don't know why I'm feeling this. I'm feeling that something is going to happen maybe later after lunch. Maybe I'm going to have to help somebody. I don't know why. That's intuition. It's very random. It's hard to trust it. It's something that comes very spontaneous and does not have the word because. There's no rationality to intuition whatsoever. It's never going to make sense to you. And that's why it's so hard to trust pure intuition. And it's something that it's not like a couple minutes in advance. It's days in advance, hours in advance, weeks in advance, years in advance. It's that kind of foresight where you can see everything in front of you. And that's true intuition. But when we talk about like the biological process of like a gut feeling, society calls intuition a gut feeling. We can say it's like you start getting this weird feeling, kind of like when you watch a movie and you start hearing the music and it starts getting more gloomy and depressing and scary, right? Mm-hmm. And you're like, uh-oh, something's going to happen.
Don't go in the house.
Yeah, don't go in the house, exactly. And the funny thing is that your biological senses are kicking on, but this is like our internal like fight or flight response. Anytime our body feels that we're in danger, it's going to kick on. It's going to choose to fight or flight. Okay. Mm-hmm. But that's not intuitive. That's a biological, it's proven, it's science, health, that kind of thing.
So
when it comes to, go ahead.
Sorry. I just have a question about, I'm really big into like manifesting and like good thoughts and you attract what comes to you. What would be the difference of like when you say like you have like these feelings, like I need to reach out to this person or I think that this is going to happen. What's the difference between that and manifesting? You know what I mean? Like if you're like, I just have a feeling something good's going to happen. And is that like, okay, maybe I'm putting all that out there, so I'm attracting good things to myself? I mean, how would you describe the difference to somebody in that regard?
Right. No, absolutely. Good question. So with manifestation, a lot of people, they're kind of, I don't know, like they get too much with it because they're like, oh, if I think bad thoughts, like just for 2 times or 3 times in the day, something bad's going to happen. And they start to freak out. I get this a lot. And I'm like, no. Like this manifestation work, there's a certain pattern that you have to do this stuff in a very routine kind of way, to get there. And even for it to work, you have to be healed. Like there are people who attempt manifestation all the time and they don't see the results, and they're like, I don't understand what happened, what broke, and then it ends up not working because they have blockages. There are times, when your intuition can kind of give you insight about something that's coming, and you think you kind of like start wanting that thing, and you think that you're starting to manifest that, but actually you have intuitive insight that's acting as manifestation, which is kind of interesting.
That is.
But yeah, no, I don't know if that answered your question, but basically, when it comes to manifestation, like you have to do it in a very routine way. So if you get this like little inkling or these feelings, it's more on the intuitive side rather than manifesting.
I gotcha.
I have a question, because from what you've been describing about intuition and it being this feeling of something's going to happen, do you feel like women are kind of taught from a young age to kind of stifle that intuition? Because for me, it's like, I feel like everyone has always had that. I feel like something's going to happen. I feel like something's going to happen, whether it's good or bad. And it's like constantly people are like, you're being dramatic, you're being paranoid, So like you kind of turn that off. Is that kind of a pattern that you maybe have been seeing in like anyone that you've been helping?
Yeah. So I help men and women. They both want to know, what intuition is and stuff like that. And they both have curiosity to it. But yeah, actually, at a young age, I think women are affected more. And women are more in tune because they are closer to their emotions, I think, than men. Just the way that we're raised. Whether if you're a man, you're told, you shouldn't show emotions, you should refrain from that. And so it takes them a little bit longer to get connected with their intuition because they kind of think more logically, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And if intuition is irrational, a lot of times, they make a coined term that women can be irrational, which, I find very offensive or something like that. But
yeah,
exactly right. But no, it's interesting when we grow up as women, we're dealing with something and we say, oh, we feel something. Most of the time you're going to get a response of, oh, you're crazy or you're hysterical or you're being irrational. So absolutely, I do feel like it is stifled when you get these kind of negative connotations and you're trained and programmed. So think about this. This coaching is having to reprogram you in a way to say, hey, no longer you should be scared of your intuition. No longer should you feel crazy if you trust it. And trust me, you will at times feel crazy because there's some random stuff maybe your intuition will say, hey, you're moving to Utah. And you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do in Utah or, something like that. But it is really like that. And then it's a good point that you bring that up because it's truly sad, whether it's men or women, everyone is discouraged from using their intuition. We're told that we have to follow a certain model. Women have to marry, a wealthy man who takes care of everything and they cook and they clean and this just very conventional style of life.
I hate that.
Yeah. And then men, they're told if they trust their feelings that, that they're a wuss or, or they have something wrong with them. They're not a man, So society has definitely made it very hard for people to trust their intuition. And so I think that's why intuition coaches are needed now, because this is something that can really save you from many things, and really bring you what is quote unquote the dream life, or eternal happiness that we don't think is achievable. So I definitely agree with you that that society definitely works very hard to discourage people from using their intuition and will make them feel terrible for listening to it. So yeah.
So getting more on the business side of things, if you had to like do maybe like an elevator pitch of why someone should need an intuition coach, what would that be?
I'm not very good at sales. But okay. I think for me, I would be very genuine and present that, for a long time you've been told that, you can't have the life that you want. Or if you want the life, that you're going to have to work 10 to 15 years harder than what most people could do, or pay exorbitant amount of money to get there. And I think when anyone who's struggling with trauma or struggling with just self-identity and self-validation and confidence and everything that you need to get there to have that perfect life that you want, because it is achievable. I think it really is for anybody. There's really, as long as you're, 18 and older, of course, but everyone can benefit, whether you're a man, whether you're a woman, you're older, younger, going through life, have been in life for a long time, have gone through pain, past trauma, marriages, like anything. You can benefit, because this is something that people, even who are spending thousands of dollars, committed 10 to 15 years to a psychologist or counselor, I think they're wonderful people, right? But there's something about ineffective practices and methods with psychologists or counselors or life coaches, because they have those limitations. They don't know what's inside your subconscious. And an intuition coach can say, hey, everything you think right now is your problem is not. Let's talk about what really is the problem, so you can finally get on your way and feel like you're achieving your world's greatest purpose, because everybody has one. So I don't know, for me, that's probably a really long-winded elevator pitch, but yeah, that's really what it is. Everyone can benefit, and it's not something that is going to take a long time for you. I'd say your turnaround time is like 6 months when you work with an intuition coach. So you're taking literally a 10 to 15 year journey and squishing it into 6 months. Yeah, which is kind of crazy to think about it. You can only imagine that the sessions can be intense, right? You're taking that 10 to 15 years and unloading it from your mind. But once you do go through it for a couple of days, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. I feel lighter. I feel happier. People will start saying, oh my God, you've changed, in a good way. And they'll be like, sign me up. And so that's really what happens. But it's a beautiful thing. And I think there should just be more people doing this, because it really is empowering you. And it's not, I don't work off of like a codependent relationship like a lot of companies and practices do. Like, I don't want you to need me. I want to be able to release you and set you free, basically. Give you this method, teach you how to do it, give you the tools. Maybe you can teach 10 other people, and over the course of a few years, maybe the whole world can change, It's really a beautiful process. So I'm very excited that I get to do this every day. And it truly is the dream job.
That's amazing. Awesome. That's like the sign of someone who like genuinely wants to help and isn't just like doing this for the sake of building a business. You know what I mean? Like that's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So no.
So at near the end of every interview that we have, I don't know if Chelsea told you about this or not.
I thought about it, but I wanted you to not have time to think about it, because I want to know really. I'll let her explain.
So we do this thing called yoga time. So very similar to the end of a yoga class where the teacher's like, do whatever pose you want for like 2 minutes, whatever. We kind of give you the opportunity to talk about anything that you're really stoked on right now, things that you're really passionate about that maybe we didn't get to cover, a TV show that you're watching that you need people to know about because it's awesome. So we want to give you a couple minute platform and let you have yoga time at the end of this podcast. So take it away.
I don't know what to talk about.
And I mean, if you don't have anything, that's fine, but it just is really interesting to see like what people are like, this is actually really important to me. And it doesn't have to be anything earth shattering or whatever. It can be seriously just a food that you love or something.
Okay. I don't know. Like, for me, I'm really passionate about, like, what I do. That's been my biggest passion lately. Like, that's all that I spend my time on, like, building people up and watching their transformations. Like, it really is, like, something I love. Like, you can even call it, like, a small, like, maybe passion project or something, but it's so much more than that. I don't know. For me, like, maybe this will sound silly, but when I was growing up, I said the statement that I was going to impact the globe in some way. And I thought about it, and it's been my life mission ever since, to really watch people change. And I'm not talking about society's definition of change, but I mean really feeling that you can live a life that's limitless. And I think for me, it was when I was writing my second book, and I was trying to create this book that I'd spent maybe 6 years on. And I think I got 365 pages done. And I just remember thinking, what if people could read something, or what if people could hear something that really inspires them to live beyond what they think they can already achieve? Society does a really good job discouraging us and telling us that we have to stay in this box, that we have to look like everybody else. We have to be like everybody else. But I guess I want to tell people that, let's change the conversation. Let's make it a society norm to trust your intuition. Let's make it a society norm to be these badass entrepreneurs. I mean, let's change the world, together. That's what I really feel about, it's not for me, I'm not a big TV person. I'm a writer though. And I love, writing passionate stories about, self-transformation and really helping people see from another different perspective, and can understand that, maybe right now I thought I couldn't do it, but maybe in 10 minutes I'll be proven wrong. Maybe I'll have that second wind of motivation that I need, and that kind of thing. So yeah.
That's awesome. What was the book that you wrote? Sorry, I didn't even ask that earlier.
So I wrote 2 books.
Okay.
I published my first one when I was 12, and
Incredible.
that one was, I think, Walking in the Water.
Mm-hmm.
And that was pretty cool. It was about choosing, society tells us that we need money and we need, fame and fortune and publicity, that's the dream life, right? But this book actually depicted all the challenges and problems when it comes to being famous, or, it talked about bulimia and anorexia with modeling agencies. It talked about this young girl aspiring to be all this and learning these harsh realities of what it would take to become this ideal dream life, and then she had a twin sister who, lived a very modest life, worked 9 to 5, could put bread on the table. But in the end of the book, spoiler alert,
Mm-hmm.
the twins, they learned different things. And it was just a really good self-reflected book that anyone could read and say, okay, I read this and I can see that what society is telling us about, fame and fortune is not going to lead me to happiness. It's really about appreciating the little moments and stuff like that. And my second book is called When August Comes. And that one's actually a lot more interesting because that book was written very intuitively through a process called automatic writing. And it was almost like oh my goodness, it was like this almost like narration was going on, in my mind, just kept writing and writing and writing all day. And I remember I finally got to a point where I spent years and wrote 365 pages, and it was almost like I was being told a story, and I just wrote everything in detail. And it talked about 2020, actually.
Wow.
So it was pretty crazy. And it talked about how in 2020, we're not going to have the same rights that we did before, and that it's going to be a life that is definitely, we're not going to have a chance to freely express anymore, that we're going to feel very conformed to society's will and ways and stuff like that. So it was an interesting science fiction novel, but actually has some psychic predictions in it, which was kind of interesting.
Where can you find your books?
So, unfortunately, around that time when I published when I was 12, I just wanted to see if I could do it. And I'm not one of those people that I really like the spotlight. So I thought to myself, I watched it kind of pick up in the UK and the US, and I was like, "Uh-oh, this book is going to be successful." And I decided to take it off the shelf, which is weird, I know. But I'm just one of those people. I'd rather be sharing people's stories and enlightening them, but I'd rather be like a ghostwriter, if that makes sense, where people, don't know who I am and don't, they just feel inspired. They read the material and that's it. That's my job. That's the end of the day. For the second book, I'm still working on it, actually, but there might be a release date maybe in 6 months, maybe 8 months, but definitely something that I'm looking to self-publish and release, because I think that now we are in 2020, but maybe it's not too late for everything. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That is amazing. That's awesome. Well, tell the people where they can find you online, on social media, etc.
Okay. So if you guys, are just starting your intuition journey, or even if you're like, I really like her story, or, feel really empowered by it, I would love to connect and everything on Intuity. It's my Instagram handle, and it's spelled INTUIT and then _Y. And then also I have a website, www.intuitylife.com. And that's pretty much it. I mean, really, I'm super down to earth, not a lot of high expectations. And I love meeting everybody and hearing your story too. So even if you're like, I don't want an intuition coach, but I want to connect with somebody really cool, I would love that even more. So, yeah.
What an angel you
I
are.
know.
Thank you
Gem.
so much. Amazing. And just so everyone knows, we will put that information in the info of this episode. So if you missed it, you didn't write it down. If you're driving, no worries. You will be able to find that. But Milan, thank you so much for coming on today. We really, really appreciate your time. And I definitely hope that people are going to get something out of this, will feel inspired. Hopefully you'll get some more people reaching out to you. I mean, girl, I'm about to DM you after this, so.
No, thank you guys for having me. It was truly an honor, and I really hope that it does help, even brighten someone's day. So
Awesome. Well, thank you. And everyone, we will see you on another episode of Let's Hustle Podcast next week. Bye.